My name is Morgan Thompson. I am 31 years old, and over the last 4 days I have become an absolute stranger to my very own life. My precious grandfather spent those grueling days pleading my name from a sterile bed, his mind buried under a heavy blanket of strong narcotics. During that time, my biological dad guarded his room like an absolute warden, gripping a legal document and a toxic lie, convincing the medical team and relatives of one false tale. Morgan abandoned him here. She is completely banned here. When I eventually pushed past his cruel blockade, assisted by a brave nurse who refused to stay quiet, my father used his entire body to block the door. He stared at the child he discarded 20 years earlier, and spat out a sentence so vicious it will haunt my nightmares forever. He only wants to be around actual family. But an experienced charge nurse named Peggy dragged me into a hidden back hallway, dropped an ancient flip phone into my palm, and completely destroyed my father's sick game. The secret audio files on that cheap device didn't just shatter my soul, they sparked a relentless rage that forced me to call the police before my grandfather's heart gave out. Before I expose the horrifying recording that ruined my family tree and put my father in handcuffs, please drop a like and subscribe, but only if you stand with victims who fight back against cruel, manipulative bullies. Leave a comment below. What city are you tuning in from, and what is the local time? Let us rewind 6 days to the exact night all the dark secrets finally surfaced. I am walking fast. The air in Maplewood, Michigan is a damp, biting cold that slices right through my coat. It is 2 in the morning. The streetlights buzz above me, casting long, lonely shadows on the empty sidewalk. My blue nursing scrubs are stiff with dried coffee and smell sharply of industrial bleach mixed with lavender lotion. That lotion belongs to Mrs. Anderson, a dementia patient at Eden View Senior Living who forgets her own name but remembers that her hands ache unless I rub them before lights out. My beat-up Honda has been dead in the driveway for 3 weeks. The mechanic said the alternator is back-ordered, somewhere in a warehouse hundreds of miles away, so I walk. It is an 18-minute trek from the clinic to my front door. Usually I use this time to clear my head, but tonight my mind is a tangled mess of exhaustion and dread. I push my key into the lock of Grandpa's house. His house. The sanctuary he built from the dirt up in night. I step into the dimly lit hallway, my wet sneakers squeaking against the oak floors he sanded by hand on his hands and knees. The silence in the house is heavy. It feels wrong. He hasn't been home to brew a pot of coffee in 6 days. I am toeing off my sneakers when my cell phone vibrates hard against my hip. The screen lights up the dark foyer. Unknown number. Area code 614. Local. I freeze. As a night shift nurse, I know the grim reality of a 2 a.m. phone call. It is never good news. It is a harbinger of disaster. My thumb hovers over the red reject button. My chest tightens, a familiar panic gripping my lungs. I have had enough bad news this year to fill a lifetime, but a sharp, heavy intuition forces my thumb to swipe green. I press the phone to my ear. Hello? Is this Morgan Thompson? A woman's voice asks. It is an older voice, clipped and tight. I can hear the strain in her tone, the distinct rhythm of a medical professional keeping her composure by sheer force of will. Yes, I say, my heart rate instantly doubling. Who is this? My name is Peggy. I'm a shift nurse over at Mercy General. She pauses. Over the line, I hear the faint rhythmic beep of a hospital monitor. Your grandfather, Harrison. She stops and takes a shaky, uneven breath. Honey, you need to come down here right now. The hardwood floor suddenly feels like it is tilting beneath my feet. My stomach drops. My grandfather. What happened? I called my dad yesterday evening. He told me Grandpa was sleeping comfortably. He said Dr. Fisher stabilized his breathing. Morgan, listen to me. Peggy cuts in, her voice dropping into a fierce, urgent whisper. Your grandfather is not stable. He is heavily medicated, but his heart rate spikes in sheer panic every single time that door opens. I grip the edge of the hallway table. Panic? Why is he panicking? Because of the person who told you he was fine. I hear her exhale softly into the receiver, the sound full of exhaustion and anger. He is not fine, and your father is not stable either. You need to get here, now. The line clicks dead. I stand completely paralyzed in the middle of the foyer. The quiet house presses in on me. I have no car. I have no answers. What I do have is a suffocating tightness in my chest and a terrible realization. Peggy had called from a personal cell phone. I know this because I have Mercy General's switchboard saved in my favorites. I know the number by heart. I have dialed it 14 times this week. Every single time, the front desk attendant read off the same agonizing robotic script. I'm sorry, Miss Thompson. The patient's medical power of attorney has restricted all visitor access and phone privileges. We cannot bypass the primary contact. his primary contact, his medical power of attorney, my father, David. To understand the absolute insanity of that document, you have to understand the man who built this house. My mother died when I was 6 years old. It was a multi-car pileup on Highway 42 during a freak black ice storm. One morning I had a mother who braided my hair too tight and sang off-key in the kitchen. By dinner time I was staring at a closed casket. My father, David, couldn't even look at me. At the wake, the relatives whispered the reason why. I had her exact hazel eyes. I was a walking ghost of the wife he lost. Dad just isn't ready. His grief is a heavy coat, Morgie. Grandpa Harrison told me gently the night he carried my small suitcase into his spare bedroom. He knelt down, his large, calloused hands resting on my narrow shoulders. This room is yours now, for as long as you want it. I was 6, confused and terrified, but I believed him, because Harrison Thompson never lied. 25 years later, I am still standing in his hallway, and my bedroom door still bears my name in his neat pencil script. 3 years after Mom's funeral, David packed a moving truck, married a woman named Barbara, and relocated 3 hours south. The Sunday phone calls shrank to holidays, then birthdays, then nothing. He became a ghost. Through it all, Grandpa never spoke an ill word about his son. The closest he ever came was one humid July evening when I was 16, crying on the porch because my father couldn't even mail a card for my birthday. Grandpa set his coffee mug down, looked out at the dark yard and sighed. Your dad is running from ghosts, Morgan, but you've got me. We build our own family here, that's enough. And it was enough. It truly was. For 15 years, Harrison Thompson woke up at 6 o'clock every morning just to make sure I had a hot breakfast before the yellow school bus rumbled down our street. Oatmeal with brown sugar and a dash of cinnamon, every single day. He taught me how to read a measuring tape, how to bleed a hissing radiator, how to change a flat tire in the pouring rain, and, most importantly, how to spot a lie. When I decided to become a nurse, he didn't just support me, he drove me 50 minutes each way to the LPN program in his rattling Ford truck. He would sit out in the freezing parking lot doing crossword puzzles under the yellow streetlights until my evening lectures were over. He was my foundation. Then, 5 months ago, the foundation cracked. It started as a persistent dry cough that he waved off as just wood dust from his workshop. But I am a nurse. I know the sound of a cough that comes from deep inside the lungs. I dragged him to Dr. Fisher, and we sat in a sterile, white room and listened to the devastating words, Stage 3 lung cancer, aggressive. I immediately went to my supervisor at Edenview and shifted my schedule strictly to nights so I could take him to his daytime chemotherapy appointments. We had a rhythm. We were fighting it together, step by step. But then 3 weeks ago, my father came back. David swooped into Maplewood like a concerned savior, armed with a slick lawyer and a mountain of fake panic. Grandpa was groggy from a heavy new pain management medication, making him vulnerable and confused. Within 48 hours of arriving, David cornered him into signing a comprehensive medical and financial power of attorney. He smiled his polished salesman smile and claimed it was just a precaution to help Morgan with the confusing hospital billing. By the time I found out, the ink was dry. The locks on Grandpa's life had been changed. David took Grandpa's smartphone, claiming it was lost in the ambulance ride, effectively severing his tie to the outside world. But my father didn't know everything about the house he grew up in. In the top drawer of his bedside nightstand, tucked safely behind a stack of scratched reading glasses and a framed photo of my mother, Grandpa kept a prepaid ancient flip phone in case the power goes out and the smart towers drop, he told me years ago. A remnant of his old-school practicality. I never thought twice about it. I really should have. Standing in the freezing kitchen, panic rising in my throat, I pull out my phone and try to order a ride share. The app wheel spins endlessly on the screen. It is 2:15 a.m. in a town of 12,000 people. The digital map is completely empty. There are no cars. Desperate, I call Rita. She is a tough-talking nursing assistant on my ward who drives a rusted Toyota Corolla that permanently smells of pine tree air fresheners and menthol cigarettes. She covered my entire section last Wednesday when a patient fell, and I loathe asking for favors, but the sheer terror in Nurse Peggy's voice is ringing in my ears. The phone rings 3 times. Rita answers, her voice thick with sleep and annoyance. Girl, are you insane? I just merged onto the highway going the total opposite direction. Rita, I need a massive favor, I say, my voice shaking. I need a ride to Mercy General, right now. Morgan, it's the middle of the night. What is going on? I know, I'm so sorry. I wouldn't call if it wasn't an absolute emergency. It's my grandfather. She sighs, a long crackling sound over the Bluetooth connection. As a fellow nurse, she knows what a midnight hospital trip means. Give me 20 minutes, be on the curb. While I wait, shivering on the dark front porch, I do what I've done every single day for the past week. I call David. Ring, ring, ring. Voicemail. I redial. Voicemail. Fourth time. Fifth time. I pace the length of the wooden porch, my breath pluming in the icy air, my fingers going numb. Finally, the line clicks open. Morgan. His voice is entirely flat. It isn't thick or gravelly with sleep. It is tight, awake, and highly controlled. My stomach twists. It's 2:20 in the morning, I say, trying to keep my voice steady. A night nurse from Mercy General just called my cell phone. She said I need to come immediately. What nurse? The question snaps back too fast, defensive and sharp. She said her name was Peggy. A heavy, suffocating silence falls over the line. I can hear the faint hum of a hospital ventilation system in the background. When he speaks again, the mask of the grieving, devoted son has completely slipped. His tone is pure ice, meant to freeze me in my tracks. Nobody was authorized to call you, David says slowly, pronouncing every word like a weapon. I am the medical power of attorney. I am the primary contact. I manage his communication and his care. That has been legally established, Morgan. I grip the wooden railing of the porch so hard my knuckles turn bright white. The splinters bite into my skin, grounding me. Dad, is Grandpa okay? Why is a veteran nurse breaking protocol to call me in the middle of the night? He's sedated, he's sleeping, he's fine. Then let me see him. Just for 5 minutes, David. Please. There is no hesitation, no warmth, no pity, just a cold iron wall. I said go to bed. The call drops. I stare at the black screen of my phone. The quiet of the neighborhood suddenly feels incredibly loud. As a nurse, I know how airtight a medical proxy is. If my father says I cannot enter that room, the hospital security will treat me like a criminal. But as a granddaughter, I know that Harrison Thompson is trapped, and I am the only one who can hear him screaming in the dark. A pair of headlights sweeps across the dark street. Rita's rusted Corolla screeches to a halt at the curb. I slide into the passenger seat, the heater blasting against my frozen face. The car smells exactly like menthol and burnt coffee, a scent that somehow grounds my racing mind. Rita takes one look at my pale expression, her hands gripping the worn steering wheel. She doesn't even put the car in park. She just shifts it into drive. What the hell is going on, Morgan? I don't know the whole picture yet, I say, staring blankly out the windshield at the dark, passing houses. But I know my father's voice. I haven't heard it in years, but I know it. That's the voice he uses when he's cornered. He's hiding something. Rita doesn't ask any more questions. She just nods, her jaw tight, and presses her foot harder on the gas pedal. The speedometer climbs as we race through the empty streets. The emergency bay lights of Mercy General glow against the pitch-black sky like a sterile beacon. I have walked into hospitals 1,000 times for my shifts, but walking in as a terrified family member feels entirely different. The automatic doors slide open, and the rush of warm, sanitized air hits me. The hospital corridors at 2:45 a.m. possess a deeply unsettling atmosphere. It isn't peaceful. It feels like a vacuum where time has simply stopped. Fluorescent lights buzz faintly overhead, casting a sickly pale glow on the polished linoleum. Somewhere in the distance, a floor buffer whirs, a low mechanical hum echoing through the silence. Room 544 is at the very end of the oncology wing. I smell the sharp tang of floor wax and rubbing alcohol. But before I even reach the door, I spot the roadblock. My father is standing squarely in the middle of the hallway. His arms are crossed tightly over his chest. I notice the details immediately. The calculated costume of a grieving son. His expensive blue dress shirt is intentionally untucked. The sleeves are rolled up to the elbows to project the image of a weary, devoted caretaker who hasn't left the bedside for days. His wife, Barbara, sits in an orange plastic waiting chair a few feet away. She is clutching a paper coffee cup with both hands, looking exactly like an actress waiting for her cue.
David's eyes lock onto me as I march down the hallway. He takes in my wrinkled blue scrubs, my disheveled hair, the dark bags under my eyes. He doesn't step aside. He plants his feet firmly in the center of the tiles. "What do you think you're doing here?" he demands. His voice is a harsh, wet hiss meant only for me. "I'm here to see my grandfather," I say, my voice steady despite the violent trembling in my hands. "Step aside, David." He tilts his head. A slow, cruel smile plays at the corner of his mouth. It is a look of absolute disdain mixed with dark victory. Then he shifts his posture. He deliberately projects his voice, making sure it carries down the quiet hallway, making sure the nurses at the far station can hear him clearly. "He doesn't want to see you, Morgan," David says loudly, adopting a tone of exhausted patience. "He is heavily medicated right now because you agitate him. He told me he wants to say goodbye to real family." The cruelty of those two words, real family, hits me like a physical blow to the ribs. The air leaves my lungs, not because I believe him. I know Harrison Thompson better than I know my own heartbeat. But the pain comes from the realization that my biological father is actively weaponizing his legal authority to traumatize me in a public hospital corridor. He is using my deepest childhood wound against me, fully aware of the audience.
Barbara shifts uncomfortably in her plastic chair, adjusting her designer silk scarf. She looks at me with wide, fake sympathetic eyes. "Honey, please, don't make a scene here. The doctors say his heart simply can't take the stress of visitors. David is just protecting him." I ignore her. I take one sharp step toward the heavy wooden door of room 514. David immediately mirrors my movement. He steps into my path and presses his palm flat against the doorframe, physically blocking the handle. His eyes are dead and cold. "I submitted the power of attorney to administration yesterday," he says, a smug edge bleeding into his low voice. "You are officially off the approved visitor list. It is a legal, binding directive. You touch this door, and I will have security escort you out for trespassing. Try me." A young night nurse, looking incredibly uncomfortable, approaches us with a glowing tablet in her hands. David turns to her, and the transformation is sickening. His posture immediately softens into the tragic, exhausted sun. He lets out a heavy, wavering sigh. "She's not on the approved list, Cindy," he says, sounding heartbroken. "I'm the medical POA. Please check his file. She has a history of causing him severe distress." The nurse taps the screen. She looks at me with sympathetic but deeply apologetic eyes. "I'm so sorry, ma'am. He's right. The POA paperwork restricts access strictly to his proxy. I legally cannot let you in." I stand completely frozen. I am a nurse. I know the rules. If I push past him, if I raise my voice, I become the hysterical, estranged daughter. David wins. They will drag me out, and I will never get back in to help the man who saved my life. 12 feet away, through the tiny crack in the door, I can hear the rhythmic, mechanical hum of his oxygen concentrator. I hear the slow, steady beep of his heart monitor. My grandfather, the man who built my entire world, the man who made me oatmeal every single morning, is right there, and I am legally locked out in the cold. I back slowly away from the door. My hands are shaking with a toxic, burning mix of adrenaline and despair. I retreat around the corner, leaning my back against the cool plaster wall. I squeeze my eyes shut, fighting off a massive panic attack, struggling to draw a single steady breath in the silent hallway. I lean my head back against the cool plaster wall, closing my eyes. I am a nurse. I know the clinical signs of a panic attack. My heart is hammering against my ribs, my breathing is too shallow, and a cold sweat is breaking out on my neck. I try to force myself to breathe. In for 4 seconds, out for 4. A basic grounding technique I teach my own patients, but it is failing. I am completely locked out of the only room that matters. If I cause a scene, David wins. The security guards will drag me out into the freezing parking lot, and my grandfather will die thinking I never came. Suddenly, a firm, rough hand clamps down onto my shoulder. My eyes snap open. Standing right beside me in the dim hallway is a woman in her late 50s. Her silver hair is pulled back into an immaculate, severe bun. Her blue scrubs are crisp, and her plastic ID badge reads, Peggy Das RN Charge Nurse. She has the kind of hardened, assessing eyes that have seen decades of grief, death, and messy family politics.
She doesn't look sorry for me. She looks furious. "Follow me," she whispers fiercely, her grip tightening for a second. "And do not say a single word." I do not hesitate. I follow her blindly. She moves with rapid, silent purpose, bypassing the brightly lit main nurse's station. We duck around a corner, and she swipes her plastic badge against a magnetic reader. A set of heavy double doors marked "Staff Only" clicks open. We slip inside. Suddenly, we are in the hidden veins of the hospital. We cut through a sterile supply closet, smelling sharply of iodine and fresh plastic, brushing past towering metal shelves stacked with IV bags and clean linens. As a nurse, I know these back routes exist, but walking them as a smuggler makes the hair on my arms stand up. Every squeak of our shoes sounds like an alarm. If David catches us, Peggy could lose her nursing license. I could be arrested. We finally stop in a dimly lit, narrow antechamber. There is a secondary wooden door here. I glance up at the plastic room number placard bolted to the wall. 514. The adjoining entrance. Peggy turns to face me. Her expression is dead serious. 4 days, she says, her voice trembling slightly with suppressed anger. For 4 straight days, your grandfather has been fighting through heavy, crippling doses of Dilaudid. Every time the fog clears for even a minute, he whispers your name. I stare at her, my chest tightening. David told me he was basically comatose. He told me he didn't want to see me. Peggy crosses her arms, her jaw locked. Your father is lying. He is intentionally keeping him sedated. I watched the central monitors, Morgan. Your grandfather's heart rate goes completely haywire the absolute second your father steps into that room. He spikes into sheer panic, and he only stabilizes the minute that man walks out the door. A cold horror washes over me. I know exactly what heavy narcotics do to a weakened elderly patient. They cause confusion, they cause deep paranoia. David is using the medication to break his mind. I went to the hospital social worker yesterday morning, Peggy continues, her voice dropping lower. I tried to flag the power of attorney as coercive. I told them this was abuse. But because your father has the expensive legal documents, and because Dr.
Fisher signed off on the sedation plan, administration tied my hands. They told me to step back. David said, he told the nurses I was the one hurting him. I choke out, a hot tear finally spilling over my eyelashes. Peggy looks at me the exact way I look at families when I have to tell them their loved one is slipping away at my clinic. It is a look completely devoid of pity, replaced entirely by harsh, necessary truth. As the pain meds wear off between doses, Harrison cries. She says, leaning closer, "He thinks you abandoned him, Morgan, because David sits in that orange chair, leans over the bed, and tells him you refuse to visit. I have been a floor nurse for 25 years. I know the exact difference between a patient who is dying and a patient who is terrified. Your grandfather isn't afraid of the cancer right now. He is terrified of his own son. My emotional collapse is quiet but total. My heart shatters inside my chest. For 4 days, my grandfather lay in this sterile prison, believing the person he raised had thrown him away like garbage." Peggy places her hand firmly on the heavy brass doorknob. "You have exactly 5 minutes before I have to log his midnight vitals in the computer system. Are you ready?" I wipe my face with the back of my sleeve. I force the nurse inside me to take over. Cold, focused. "I'm ready." She silently pushes the door open. The room is pitch black, illuminated only by the sterile, blinking green lights of the IV pump and the amber streetlights filtering through the window blinds. It smells of sickness and stale air. I step inside, and a physical shock hits my system. He looks so much smaller. 3 weeks ago, before David arrived and the isolation began, Grandpa was frail but undeniably present. He was sitting up, complaining that the cafeteria soup tasted like dirty dishwater. Now he looks like a faded pencil sketch of the man I know. His skin is thin and translucent, like worn tissue paper. A thick plastic oxygen cannula is taped firmly beneath his nose, hissing softly with every shallow breath. An IV line snakes into the back of his left hand, the exact same broad, scarred hand that used to drive heavy nails through solid oak without flinching. At the soft sound of my footsteps, his eyelids flutter. They are red-rimmed, sunken deep into his skull. His eyes search the dark shadows of the room. When they finally find my face, his mouth parts, trembling violently. It isn't a smile. It is the visceral, overwhelming relief of a drowning man finally breaking the surface of the water to pull in a breath of air. "Morgie," he rasps. His voice sounds like crushed glass. I am at his bedside in a fraction of a second.
I drop heavily to my knees on the cold floor and gently take his free hand. It feels terrifyingly light, like dry, hollow leaves. "I'm here, Grandpa," I whisper, pressing his knuckles to my forehead. "I'm right here." His weak, shaking fingers curl tightly around mine. He has almost no physical strength left, but his grip is anchored by pure, desperate willpower. "I thought," he breathes, his chest rising with massive effort. "David said he told me you wouldn't come." "I know what he told you," I whisper, my voice cracking in the quiet, dark room. "He told me you were furious with me. He told me you were too tired, that my visits only made your heart rate spike." Grandpa's frail chin shakes. His eyes, usually so sharp and steady, are cloudy with a cocktail of grief and heavy narcotics. "He sat right in that orange chair, Morgie." He looked at me and said, "He told me you said you didn't need an old, dying man holding you back anymore. He said you were picking up extra shifts to avoid looking at me." The absolute monstrousness of the lie makes the blood pound violently in my ears. The sound of his heart monitor seems to mock me, beeping in the background. My own father had studied the deepest, most painful insecurities of my childhood and weaponized them to break the man who raised me.
For 4 days, my grandfather lay in this sterile prison, fighting aggressive cancer and crippling pain, fully believing the one person he loved had thrown him away like garbage. "Grandpa, look at me," I say, squeezing his paper-thin hand. "I called the hospital front desk 14 times this week. I called Dad every single day begging to come in. He used his power of attorney to legally ban me from the building. He told the nurses I was a danger to you. He built a wall around you and he lied to both of us to keep us apart while you were most vulnerable." Harrison closes his eyes. A single heavy tear escapes, tracking through the deep, pale wrinkles of his cheek and soaking silently into the crisp hospital pillowcase. I watch his chest rise and fall, a ragged, painful rhythm. But then, something incredible happens. As I watch, the dense fog of the Dilaudid seems to part. The sorrow and confusion vanish from his face, replaced suddenly by the sharp, calculating glint of the master carpenter I grew up with. A man who measures twice, cuts once, and never builds on a crooked foundation. "Listen to me," he breathes, his chest rising with massive effort. His eyes dart toward the closed door, checking for shadows in the hallway, before locking back onto mine. "I don't have the breath to waste." He thought the morphine had me fully under. He thought I was just an old fool sleeping. He got careless, Morgie. He slowly shifts his gaze toward the beige metal nightstand beside his bed. I prepared. Nurse Peggy, who has been keeping watch by the door, steps silently out of the shadows. Her rubber-soled shoes make absolutely no sound on the linoleum. She slides open the top drawer of the nightstand, reaches past a plastic hospital basin and a stack of medical tape, and pulls out an object. She holds it out to me in her gloved hand. It is the ancient, silver flip phone. It is scratched, archaic, and worth maybe $30 at a gas station. Next to the $1 million medical equipment keeping him alive, it looks like a toy. "Your grandfather managed to wave me down and ask me to hide this 4 days ago?" Peggy whispers, glancing nervously at her watch. "It was right after David confiscated his smartphone and erased your contact info from the board. I've kept it buried under the spare linens every morning before David arrives." Grandpa looks back at me, his eyes burning with a sudden, intense urgency. "Press play." I recorded everything. I take the cold plastic phone from Peggy. My hands are shaking so badly I almost drop it onto the floor. I flip it open. There is no cloud storage, no fancy touchscreen interface, no passwords. There is just a basic voice memo app with a glowing red recording icon and a list of 8 saved audio files. The very first file is dated 6 days ago. I press the middle button to play, holding the tiny, tinny speaker close to my ear. At first, there is just the rustle of fabric. Then David's voice fills the quiet space. It is crystal clear, entirely stripped of the public sympathy and manufactured grief he performs in the hallway. "Listen to me, old man. You are going to sign this medical proxy and the financial release, or I swear to God I will have you transferred to the cheapest state-run nursing home in this county tomorrow morning. The kind of place where they leave you lying in a soiled bed for 2 days. The kind of place where nobody visits. The kind of place where you die completely alone." My breath catches in my throat. I look at my grandfather, horror washing over me. Then Grandpa's voice plays through the tiny speaker, raspy, weak, but fiercely defiant. "That's my house. I built that house with my own hands. It goes to Morgan." David sneers, his voice cutting through the audio with dripping venom. "You built it 45 years ago. Now you're lying here rotting. Who do you think you're saving it for? For that girl? She's not even my—" On the recording, there is a sharp, sudden intake of breath. David catches himself just in time, swallowing the rest of the sentence.
She shouldn't get a dime of it.
I hit pause. The silence in the hospital room is deafening. She's not even my own father, standing right over the deathbed of the man who saved my life, nearly confessed out loud the toxic, rotting resentment he had harbored for 25 years. He nearly said the words that had defined my entire childhood. He nearly said I wasn't his daughter. I look down at Grandpa. His eyes are locked onto mine, steady, sorrowful, and completely wide awake. "There are 7 more, he whispers, his voice dropping to a gravelly thread. "Listen to all of them, Morgie. And then you walk out of here, and you do what I don't have the strength to do anymore. You tear his house of cards down. The crushing sadness in my chest evaporates. In its place, a cold, methodical fury takes over. It is the kind of anger that doesn't scream or throw things. It is the kind of anger that organizes paperwork, locks doors, and sharpens knives. The weeping granddaughter disappears into the shadows of the hospital room, and the veteran night shift nurse steps forward. I pull a plastic guest chair close to the bed, press the ancient flip phone to my ear, and listen to my biological father dismantle an old man's life, track by track. The tiny speaker crackles, but the truth is impossible to misunderstand. I press play on recording 3. David is on speakerphone with his wife, Barbara. I can hear the sharp, rhythmic squeak of his expensive leather shoes pacing the linoleum floor of this exact room. "Once he signs the final deed transfer, we list the house," David says, his voice vibrating with greedy excitement. "The housing market in Maplewood is peaking right now. We can pay off the second mortgage on our place and still have 50 grand left over in cash." Barbara's voice comes through, tinny and hesitant over the line. "But what about the girl, David? What about Morgan? She lives there." David scoffs, a wet, ugly sound. "What about her? She can rent a cheap apartment like everyone else. I'm not running a charity." I swallow hard, my eyes locked on the rhythmic rise and fall of Grandpa's chest. I tap the keypad. Recording 4. David is standing right over the bed. His voice is dangerously quiet. "Morgan's not coming, Dad. I just got off the phone with her. She said she picked up extra shifts at the clinic. She told me she is simply too busy to sit around watching you sleep." Then I hear Grandpa's voice. It is so small, so utterly broken, it makes my own breath hitch. "She said that, David? Her exact words? She won't even come for 5 minutes?" "Her words, Dad, not mine," David replies smoothly, not missing a single beat. "Now pick up the pen and sign the damn paper." I bite the inside of my cheek until I taste copper. Recording 6. There is a violent, scraping sound, a heavy chair being dragged aggressively across the floor. Grandpa is refusing to sign the property deed. David snarls, his voice dropping into a menacing hiss. "You want to play hardball, old man? Fine. You want to die alone in this room? Because I can arrange that right now. I will walk out that door. I will use my legal authority to take the nursing staff off your rotation, and I won't come back until that machine flatlines." I look up. Peggy is standing by the door, her hand resting on the handle. Her eyes are wide with disgust. She heard that one too. Finally, I reach recording 7. This is the one that makes the blood run completely cold in my veins. David is on his cell phone, talking to a bank representative. He is flawlessly reciting Grandpa's full name, his date of birth, and his social security number. He is confidently answering the secret security questions. Yes, his mother's maiden name was Miller, David says smoothly. Then he requests a wire transfer of $5,800 into what he claims is a joint medical expense account. Grandpa has never held a joint account in his 82 years of life. I hit the stop button. I set the silver flip phone gently onto my lap. My hands are no longer shaking. I feel completely, terrifyingly numb. "I'm so sorry you had to hear the ugly truth of him, Morgie," Grandpa whispers, reaching his frail hand out to touch my arm. "You don't owe me a single apology," I say. My voice is eerily calm, matching the steady mechanical beep of the heart monitor. "What do you need me to do?" "Protect the house. Protect yourself," he breathes, his eyes sharpening. "Open the banking app on your phone." He slowly recites his complex alphanumeric banking password entirely from memory. I don't ask how he remembers it through the heavy painkillers. Harrison Thompson trusts his own brain more than he trusts a computer. Last year, when the terrible cough first started, and Dr. Fisher ordered the very first lung biopsy, Grandpa quietly dragged me to the local credit union. He added my name to his primary checking account, just in case the winter gets bad and I can't drive to the teller myself, he had claimed. I signed the paperwork at the kitchen table and entirely forgot it existed, until right now. I pull the glowing banking app up on my smartphone. The screen casts a harsh blue light across my face in the dark room. 4 months ago, his balance was $52,000. It was his entire life's safety net, a massive culmination of decades of hard carpentry contracts, incredibly frugal living, and saved Social Security checks. It was meant to cover his end-of-life care. I blink at the screen, letting the page load. The current balance is $36,400. $15,600 is gone. My heart hammers against my ribs. I immediately pull up the transaction history. The money wasn't drained slowly over the year. It was violently extracted in just the last 3 weeks, starting the exact day David arrived in Maplewood. There are 5 separate wire transfers. Each one is mathematically calculated to be just under $6,000. As a professional, I know exactly what this is. It is a classic structuring tactic, designed specifically to avoid triggering the bank's automatic fraud reporting threshold. Every single dollar was quietly routed to an external account ending in 9952. And the theft doesn't stop there. I check his direct deposits. His federal Social Security check, $1,850 a month, hasn't landed in the account for the last 3 months. Someone intercepted the physical mail, logged into the federal online portal, and changed the direct deposit routing numbers before David even physically returned to town. "Grandpa," I whisper, my eyes glued to the digital ledger, "did you authorize a change to your Social Security deposits?" He shakes his head weakly against the pillow, wincing in pain. "I asked David about the missing checks last week. He told me the federal bank was just experiencing software glitches." I don't waste another second. I screenshot every single page on my phone, the transaction logs, the routing numbers, the exact timestamps. I immediately email the entire gallery of photos to my encrypted personal backup drive. Peggy cracks the wooden door open, checking the dim hallway.
"The sun is coming up, Morgan," she whispers urgently. "It is 4:52 a.m. David arrives at 7 a.m. sharp every single morning. The first thing he does is inspect this room to make sure the staff hasn't given him a phone. You have to leave right now."
I look at the digital wall clock glowing red in the darkness. I have exactly 2 hours. 2 hours to take $15,600 worth of digital felony evidence and 8 audio recordings of cruel extortion, and build a trap my father cannot possibly escape. Before I leave the sterile safety of room 514, I need to understand something fundamentally important. Sitting in that dark hospital room, bathed only in the harsh blue light of my smartphone screen, I realize that I cannot react with emotion. If I confront David right now, if I stand in the hallway and scream at him for what he has done, he wins. He will use his legal power of attorney to call security. He will brand me as a hysterical, estranged daughter who cannot handle the grief of losing her grandfather. He expects me to be weak. He expects me to break. But I am a triage nurse. I handle crisis protocols and coding patients for a living. I know how to compartmentalize terror. And my father is about to learn the absolute difference between being quiet and being powerless. It is 4:55 a.m. First, I dig into the bottom of my nursing bag and pull out a frayed USB sync cable. I connect the silver flip phone to my smartphone. The 2 devices link with a soft digital chime that sounds deafening in the quiet room. I rip all 8 audio files, highlighting them with a trembling thumb. The green progress bar appears on my screen. It moves agonizingly slowly. 15%, 30%. Out in the hallway, the heavy mechanical clunk of the elevator shaft echoes through the wall. My heart jumps into my throat. Is it the morning phlebotomist doing 5 a.m. blood draws? Or is David early? I hold my breath, my eyes locked on the digital bar. 75%, 100%, transfer complete. I immediately upload the files to a secure cloud server and email them to 3 different personal accounts. 2 backups. If David finds the flip phone under the pillows and smashes it into pieces, the ghosts in the machine will survive. I stand up and squeeze my grandfather's hand one last time. He has fallen into a genuine, exhausted sleep. The sheer terror has left his face, replaced by the deep, heavy slack of a man who has finally handed off a terrible burden. "I'll be back," I whisper to the quiet room. I slip out the side door, navigating the labyrinth of back halls, and step into the freezing concrete stairwell. The air smells of industrial bleach and old dust. Here, in the absolute quiet, I make my moves. Second, I dial the county elder abuse hotline, run by Adult Protective Services. The office is closed, so the call goes to a secure answering machine. I leave a highly structured 3-minute voicemail. I list my full name, my clinical nursing credentials, the patient's exact location, and a summary of the financial and psychological abuse.
I keep my voice entirely devoid of emotion, facts only. Third, I dial the non-emergency dispatch for the Maplewood Police Department. The dispatcher who answers is awake, sharp, and entirely professional. I explain that I have concrete audio evidence of felony extortion and bank fraud exceeding $10,000 against a vulnerable senior citizen. I hear her typing rapidly on a keyboard. She logs the official report and promises a detective from the Financial Crimes Unit will contact me by noon. At Edenview Senior Living, nurses are mandatory reporters. I have personally filed 4 elder abuse reports against negligent families in my 8-year career. I know the legal vernacular. I know the exact thresholds required for an emergency injunction. This time, the victim is my own grandfather, and the predator is my own father, but the bureaucratic steps do not change. At 6:15 a.m., I exit the hospital through the loading dock doors before David's luxury sedan even pulls into the parking lot. At 7:20 a.m., I am sitting in the hospital's ground floor cafeteria with Rita. The room is aggressively bright, smelling of burnt toast and sanitizing wipes. Rita bought me a blueberry muffin that feels like dry ash in my mouth and a black coffee that I am practically inhaling just to keep my hands warm. Suddenly, my cell phone vibrates violently against the plastic table. The caller ID flashes. David? I swipe the green button to answer, simultaneously dragging my finger down to hit the screen record button. Michigan is a one-party consent state for recording phone calls. Anything he says to me right now is legally mine to keep. You were in his room last night. It isn't a question. It is a venomous, vibrating accusation. The performance of the grieving son is entirely gone. I visited my grandfather, yes, I say evenly, staring at my dark reflection in the coffee. Who the hell bypassed my authority and let you in?
David demands, his breath coming quick and harsh through the receiver.
I am going to administration the second the offices open. I am going to sue this hospital into the ground, Morgan. I will have the license of whatever nurse opened that door. You can sue whoever you want, David. I came to see my family. I hear a sharp, angry exhale through his nose. When he speaks again, his voice drops into a menacing, highly controlled register. He is trying to establish absolute dominance. Listen to me very carefully, Morgan, because I am only going to say this once, he hisses. You are currently squatting in my father's house. That house is legally about to not be his anymore. I am finalizing the paperwork with a notary today. If you want a roof over your head next month, I highly suggest you rethink your insubordinate behavior and stay far away from my patient. I say absolutely nothing. I let the dead silence hang between us over the cellular towers. I let the recording app capture every single second of his raw extortion. David interprets my silence as submission. He scoffs, a wet sound of pure arrogance. And don't get any heroic ideas, he adds, his voice dripping with condescension. He's dying, Morgan. His brain is riddled with tumors and heavy narcotics. He hallucinates. He babbles about people stealing from him. Nobody in this town, and certainly no judge, is going to believe the paranoid ramblings of a dying old man over his devoted son. I trace the rim of my paper coffee cup with my finger. I don't need anyone to believe him, I say softly. I just need the bank records.
I hang up the phone before he can even draw a breath to respond. Rita is staring at me across the table, her eyes wide, a half-eaten muffin frozen in her hand. Was that your dad? Yeah. Are you okay? She asks, studying the icy calm on my face. I take a slow sip of the bitter black coffee, better than I've been in 4 months. At 10 a.m. my phone rings again. The screen displays a 614 area code, but this time it is an official number. Morgan Thompson? This is Detective Laura Harding from the county's Financial Crimes and Elder Abuse Task Force. Her voice is crisp, professional, and entirely awake. I sit up straighter in my kitchen chair. Yes, Detective. I have the audio files and the bank screenshots ready. Good. I want to see them immediately. Meet me at Mercy General in the administrative basement at 1 p.m. sharp. At 12:45 p.m., Rita drops me back at the front entrance of the hospital. The daytime atmosphere is completely different from the eerie, silent vacuum of the night shift. Now the lobby is flooded with pale winter sunlight. People are rushing everywhere. Nurses are calling out charts. Visitors are carrying cheap Mylar balloons, and the PA system chimes cheerfully overhead. But under my heavy winter coat, my muscles are coiled tight as wire. I am running on zero sleep and pure burning adrenaline. Before I head down to the basement to meet Detective Harding, I need to check the oncology floor. I need to know if David has retaliated. I take the elevator up to the 4th floor. As the metal doors slide open, I step out and immediately freeze. Standing right outside room 514 is David. I quickly duck backward, pressing my spine flat against the cold metal of a vending machine in the alcove. The machine hums loudly against my shoulder, vibrating through my coat, helping to mask the sound of my ragged breathing. I peek carefully around the edge. David is standing in the middle of the hallway, shaking hands with Dr. Fisher, the lead oncologist. David looks immaculate. He is wearing a pressed blue button-down shirt that makes him look dependable and solid. His eyes are artificially red, likely from rubbing them raw with his knuckles just moments before the doctor walked up. Barbara stands a half step behind him, clutching a tissue, performing her silent role as the supportive, exhausted wife. I just want to ensure my dad is getting the most aggressive comfort care possible, David is saying. He pauses, and his voice cracks perfectly on the word dad. It is a flawless, sickening performance. He is my absolute hero, Dr. Fisher. Seeing him like this, it's just breaking my heart. Dr. Fisher, a genuinely kind man who has spent months trying to save my grandfather, sighs heavily. He reaches out and pats David's shoulder with deep sympathy. Harrison is incredibly lucky to have a son like you advocating for him, David, the doctor says softly. Families often fracture under this kind of stress, but the new power of attorney you filed yesterday ensures there are no confusing disruptions in his daily care. You are doing the right thing. I squeeze my eyes shut. A wave of physical nausea rises in the back of my throat. I am watching a predator wear a human mask, entirely fooling a medical professional who holds my grandfather's life in his hands. Thank you, doctor, David whispers, wiping a fake tear from his cheek. That means the world to us. The second doctor... Fisher turns the corner and disappears into the busy elevator bay. The entire atmosphere in the hallway violently shifts. The heavy, tragic grief instantly evaporates from David's face. His shoulders snap back, his jaw locks. He turns sharply to Barbara, his face taut with sudden raw panic. The mask is gone. Morgan got into the room last night, he hisses, stepping closer to his wife so his voice doesn't carry. What? Barbara whispers, looking nervously up and down the hallway. How? You said the nurses were blocked. Someone on the night staff sneaked her in. David snaps, dragging a hand through his perfectly styled hair. She called me this morning. She knows I'm making moves. We have to push the timeline up right now. I'm bringing the mobile notary back this afternoon at 3 o'clock. He has to sign the house deed transfer today. He's too weak to fight me off much longer. Barbara twists her designer scarf around her fingers. David, what if she comes back while the notary is here? What if she starts screaming in the hallway? David's eyes go completely cold. He pulls his cell phone out of his pocket. I already handled it. I just came from the security office downstairs. I filed a formal harassment complaint. I told them she threatened me. If she shows her face anywhere on this floor, they are going to physically throw her out onto the street. They push the heavy wooden door open and step into my grandfather's room. The door clicks shut, locking him in the dark with them once again. My heart is pounding so hard it hurts my ribs. I pull my phone out of my pocket with trembling fingers. I open a blank note and type exactly what I just heard, word for word. I hit save, locking the timestamp into the digital record. He is bringing the notary today at 3 p.m. David thinks he has until this afternoon to break an 82-year-old man. He thinks he has walled off every possible exit, but he is looking in the wrong direction. I slip out from behind the humming vending machine, turn my back on the oncology wing, and head straight for the basement stairs. At 1 p.m., I push open the heavy door to a cramped, windowless conference room deep in the hospital's administrative basement. The air down here is stale, smelling of old paper and dust. Fluorescent lights hum loudly overhead, flickering slightly. Sitting across a scratched wooden table from me is Detective Laura Harding. She is a compact woman in her late 50s, wearing a sharp, dark blazer and wire-rimmed reading glasses strung on a silver chain. She possesses the heavy, intimidating aura of a woman who has spent 14 years putting white-collar predators in state prison. She doesn't offer a warm smile or empty sympathy. She just points to the empty plastic chair opposite her. I sit down. I don't cry. I don't vent about my childhood. I open my thick manila folder and present the case exactly as I would present a critical incident report to the medical board. I slide the silver USB drive across the table.
This contains 8 audio recordings of extortion and emotional abuse, I say, my voice steady. Next, I lay out the printed bank screenshots. These are his primary checking accounts. There is $15,600 in unauthorized structured wire transfers. Then I slide over the time-stamped recording of David threatening my housing that morning, followed by a signed written statement from Nurse Peggy detailing the severe psychological distress and the weaponization of the sedatives. Harding doesn't say a word.
She plugs the USB drive into her thick, secure laptop. She pulls a pair of heavy black headphones over her ears and clicks the mouse. I sit in absolute silence for 20 agonizing minutes. The only sound in the room is the faint scratching of her pen against a yellow legal pad and the ticking of the wall clock. I watch her face closely. I look for micro-expressions, for any sign that she thinks I am just a bitter, hysterical daughter making things up, but her facial expression never changes. Only her jaw tightens slightly as she listens to track 6, the track where my father threatens to walk out and let the heart monitor flatline. When she finally pulls the headphones down, her eyes are as hard as flint. Michigan is a one-party consent state, Harding says, her voice low and tight. Your grandfather was a conscious participant in these conversations in his own hospital room. This audio is entirely admissible in a court of law. She picks up the printed bank statements, adjusting her glasses. She traces the dates with the tip of her pen. Structuring wire transfers just under the $6,000 threshold to dodge IRS and bank fraud flags is a textbook felony move. It is a massive red flag. I will need a judge to sign a formal subpoena for the full transaction logs. But what you have handed me on this table is more than enough for probable cause. What happens to my grandfather right now? I ask, leaning forward, my professional mask finally slipping to reveal the terrified granddaughter beneath. David is bringing a mobile notary to his room at 3 p.m. today. He is trying to force him to sign away the deed to his house. Harding stands up, smoothly closing her laptop. Not anymore. Based on this evidence, I am filing for an emergency ex parte injunction. It is a legal strike that will immediately suspend your father's medical power of attorney and freeze every single connected financial account. It takes a few hours to process through a judge. Until then, I need to speak with Harrison to confirm the timeline. We take the elevator back up to the 4th floor. When we step out, the private security guard David hired is standing firmly outside room 514. He holds his hand up to stop us. Harding doesn't even break her stride. She smoothly flips open a leather wallet, flashing a gleaming gold police badge right in his face. County Financial Crimes Task Force. Step aside, she orders. The guard blinks, looks at the badge, and quickly steps backward against the wall. Inside the room, the heavy sedatives have worn off just enough. Harrison manages to give a shaky, quiet, but incredibly lucid statement. He recites the missing bank amounts and the dates of the extortion perfectly. He is exhausted, his breathing shallow, but his mind is sharp. Harding records every single word on a small digital recorder, her voice gentle but precise. When we step back out into the bright hallway, Harding pauses. She looks at me, tilting her head slightly. Your father is hosting a massive community prayer vigil tomorrow night at Hope Community Church, she says softly. He has plastered it all over the local social media pages. He is playing the tragic devoted son. Half the town will be there to support him. She studies my face, her eyes narrowing.
The injunction will hit his accounts by Monday morning. What exactly are you planning to do between now and then, Morgan?
I meet her veteran gaze. My heart is completely calm.
I'm just planning to attend church, detective.
She holds my gaze for a long, heavy moment. A faint, almost imperceptible smirk touches the corner of her mouth.
I have seen this specific pathology before, Morgan. The charming prodigal son who shows up at the 11th hour to play the hero and steal the estate. Let him talk. Let him dig the hole, and then you let me know.
Saturday night. The house is entirely silent. Outside, the winter wind howls against the window panes, rattling the glass. I am sitting at Grandpa's cherry wood desk in the living room. The thick folder of printed evidence sits neatly on the polished wood. The house feels huge and empty without him, the floorboards settling into the foundation he cut 50 years ago with a soft, mournful creak. Suddenly, my cell phone buzzes against the wood. I glance at the screen. It is a number I haven't seen in over a year. Kevin. Kevin is 24 years old. He is my half-brother, the son of David and Barbara. We share a last name and absolutely nothing else. He grew up in an affluent, gated suburb, constantly fed the false narrative that I was the bitter, estranged, crazy daughter who ruined their perfect family. We never spoke. I pick up the phone. Hello? Morgan? His voice is incredibly quiet, hesitant. I can hear him breathing heavily, like he is hiding in a closet. "Kevin," I say, keeping my tone guarded. "Did Dad tell you to call and yell at me about the hospital restrictions?" He is quiet for a long time. The silence stretches over the line. "No," he finally says. "Something is deeply wrong with him, Morgan. Not Grandpa, Dad." I grip the edge of the wooden desk. "What do you mean?" Kevin swallows hard, forcing the difficult words out. "He's been acting manic, desperate. He paces the house at 3 a.m., muttering to himself. He is terrified. He needs money, Morgan, a lot of it." Kevin stops, taking a shaky breath. "I was looking for jumper cables in the trunk of his car last week. I found a hidden folder. It was his termination papers." The air leaves my lungs. Termination? He got fired from the regional dealership management team 9 months ago. Kevin whispers, his voice cracking with shame. There were massive embezzlement allegations on his sales numbers. He owes them thousands to avoid criminal charges. Mom has absolutely no idea. She thinks he's on a highly paid corporate sabbatical. I close my eyes. The final puzzle piece clicks into place in the dark room. This wasn't just a greedy cash grab. This was an act of sheer blind desperation. David didn't come back to Maplewood to bury his father. He came back to liquidate him. "Do you have actual proof of what you're doing?" Kevin asks, his voice trembling. "Mom said you were crazy. Are you coming to the vigil tomorrow?" "Yes, Kevin," I say softly, staring at the folder of evidence. "I have proof, and I'll be there." I hang up the phone. The hardest lesson I learned sitting at that desk is that monsters rarely look like monsters in the movies. Most of the time, people don't steal from their family because they are purely evil. They steal because they are drowning in the consequences of their own failures. And a drowning man will pull down whoever is closest to stay afloat, even his own dying father. But understanding his sad, desperate motive didn't mean I was going to let him sink my grandfather. Sunday night. Hope Community Church. The white clapboard building sits on the corner of Elm and 4th, glowing against the freezing pitch-black winter sky. The wind howls, rattling the stained glass windows, but inside, the air is thick and stifling. It smells of melting candle wax, damp wool coats, and lemon wood polish. My grandfather, Harrison Thompson, personally built the heavy oak pews in this sanctuary back in 1996. He sanded every single plank by hand on his knees so the congregation wouldn't get splinters. Tonight, the parking lot is entirely full. Maplewood is the kind of small town where, when a pillar of the community falls ill, everyone shows up. I stand in the freezing vestibule, my hand resting on the heavy brass handle of the sanctuary doors. Through the crack, I can see 160 people crammed into the pews. I recognize every single face. Mrs. Sanders from next door, Paul Garner, the head of the local carpentry guild. Aunt Rose, Grandpa's younger sister, sits in the 4th row, weeping softly into a crumpled tissue. Soft, mournful organ music fills the air. Pastor John Collins, a kind man with silver hair who has known Grandpa for 45 years, steps up to the wooden pulpit. "Tonight, we gather to pray for Harrison Thompson," Pastor Collins begins, his voice echoing over the microphone. "A man who built the very chairs you are sitting on, who repaired roofs for widows free of charge, and who taught an entire generation of this town the quiet, steady dignity of an honest day's work." From the front row, David stands up. My stomach tightens into a hard knot. He is wearing a flawless, custom-tailored navy suit. His posture is slumped just enough to project exhaustion. As he walks to the microphone, he wipes his eyes. It is the practiced, slick solemnity of a politician stepping in front of the cameras. "My father is the greatest man I've ever known," David says into the mic. His voice wavers with manufactured, pitch-perfect emotion. "When I got the terrible call that he was fading, I dropped my career. I dropped everything in my life. I came home to Maplewood because that is what a family does. We protect our own." A soft murmur of collective sympathy ripples through the crowded room. Heads nod, tissues are pulled from purses. "Dad taught me that family stands together," David continues, looking out over the sea of faces, his hands gripping the edges of the wooden pulpit. "And tonight, looking at all of you, I know my family is here." Sincere, gentle applause fills the room. 160 people are entirely captivated, their hearts bleeding for a master manipulator. I grip the brass handle. I take a deep, icy breath, and I push the heavy doors open. The hinges let out a loud, groaning creak that cuts right through the applause.
Heads in the back pews turn, whispers instantly ignite and spread forward like a brush fire catching in dry grass. I am not wearing a dark suit. I am not crying. I am wearing my worn winter boots, jeans, and a thick gray sweater. In my left hand, I hold a thick manila folder of financial records. In my right hand, I hold a $30 silver flip phone. David is still standing at the microphone. His tragic, humble smile instantly freezes. I watch from 50 feet away as his polished mask violently shatters, hardening into a look of pure, unadulterated terror. He grips the wooden edges of the pulpit so tightly his knuckles turn bone white. I walk slowly up the long center aisle. I don't rush, I don't look at the floor. I walk the exact way my grandfather taught me to walk onto a busy construction site, with absolute authority and the undeniable right to be there. As I reach the front of the church, the silence is so heavy it feels like a physical weight pressing down on the room.
David leans into the microphone, desperately attempting to maintain his illusion. A bead of sweat rolls down his temple. "Morgan," he says, his voice tight and breathless. "I am so glad you found the time to join us." I don't look at him. I look directly at Pastor Collins. "Pastor," I say clearly, my voice carrying without a microphone. "As his granddaughter, I would like to say a few words about Harrison." Pastor Collins looks confused, but he nods gently, gesturing to the pulpit. David's jaw clenches so hard I can hear his teeth grind. He has absolutely no choice. Denying a grieving granddaughter the microphone in front of 160 staring townspeople would instantly destroy his benevolent facade. As we cross paths on the altar steps, he leans in. His expensive cologne hits my nose. His breath is hot against my ear, and his voice drops to a venomous, panicked hiss. "Do not do anything stupid, you little bitch. I will ruin you." I don't blink. I turn my head, looking directly into his terrified eyes. "I'm not stupid, David," I whisper back. "That's the one thing you never figured out." I step up to the beautiful oak pulpit my grandfather built. I look out at the sea of faces illuminated by the warm, flickering candlelight. Aunt Rose is staring at me, her eyes wide. I take a deep breath. "My grandfather, Harrison Thompson, is lying in a hospital bed right now," I say. My voice is steady, echoing off the high, arched ceilings. I learned exactly how sick he was 6 days ago, but I didn't learn it from my father. I learned it from a brave night nurse who called me at 2 a.m. because she could no longer stomach the abuse she was witnessing. The whispers in the pews abruptly stop. The church plunges into a dead, electric silence. People stop breathing. "For 4 days, my grandfather cried my name in the dark," I continue, letting my anger bleed into my words. "He thought I abandoned him because my father sat in a chair by his bed and told him I refused to visit. And when I called the hospital, my father used a coerced legal document to ban me from the floor. He lied to both of us. He kept us apart while Grandpa was most vulnerable, because he needed him isolated." David steps forward, his face flushing crimson red. "Morgan, you are hysterical. You don't know what you're saying, you're grieving." I raise my left hand, my palm facing out, silencing him with a sharp, cutting motion. "I am not finished." I turn back to the shocked congregation. "My grandfather is a master carpenter. He is a man who builds things to last, and when he realized he was trapped in that room, he built a failsafe." I hold up the ancient, scratched silver flip phone. The crowd stares at it. I hit the play button on the keypad. But I don't just hold it up in the air. I press the phone's tiny, tinny speaker directly against the incredibly sensitive metal mesh of the pulpit microphone. The massive sound system screeches with feedback for a microsecond, and then David's venomous, unedited voice booms through the massive PA speakers, echoing violently off the walls of the holy sanctuary. "Listen to me, old man. You are going to sign this medical proxy and the financial release, or I swear to God I will have you transferred to the cheapest state-run nursing home in this county tomorrow morning. The kind of place where nobody visits. The kind of place where you die completely alone." A collective gasp violently sucks the oxygen out of the room. A woman in the back row covers her mouth in sheer horror. Paul Garner grips the pew in front of him, his face turning dark with rage. I tap the screen, instantly switching to the next file. The PA system broadcasts David calmly negotiating a fraudulent $5,800 bank transfer using his dying father's social security number. David lunges at the pulpit, his arms flailing. "Turn that off. It's spliced. It's a fake recording. He was hallucinating." Aunt Rose stands up in the 4th row. The crumpled tissue falls from her shaking hand. Her eyes lock onto her nephew, blazing with absolute heartbroken fury. "David," her voice cuts through the chaos like a cracking whip. "That is your voice." Pastor Collins steps forward, his face pale but stern. He places a heavy, unforgiving hand firmly on David's shoulder. "David," the pastor says, his voice shaking with disgust, "I strongly suggest you step away from this pulpit." David violently wrenches his shoulder away from the pastor. He looks exactly like a cornered animal. He scans the 160 faces in the pews, his eyes darting wildly, desperately searching for a single ally, a single look of sympathy or doubt. There is nothing but pure disgust. He turns to Barbara. She is staring at him, her face completely pale, finally realizing the horrifying depths of the financial and moral lies she has been living in. "We need to leave. Right now," she hisses, grabbing her designer purse and stepping away from him. David turns to the back of the church. Kevin, his son, is standing near the heavy exit doors. He has been standing there the entire time, watching from the shadows. "Kevin, let's go," David barks, his voice cracking. Kevin doesn't move a single muscle. He stands perfectly still, looking at his father with an expression of profound pity. He shakes his head slowly, a silent, final rejection. David's broad shoulders collapse. Stripped of his fake power, his stolen money, and his captive audience, he has nothing left. He shoves open the heavy side door and disappears into the freezing, howling night. I turn back to the congregation. The silence is deafening. "Thank you for coming tonight," I say softly into the mic, my voice finally breaking. "My grandfather deserves to know that this town truly loves him. That is all I came here to do." The immediate aftermath is a blur of tearful, overwhelming apologies. Paul Garner grips my hands with his rough palms, apologizing over and over for doubting me. Aunt Rose hugs me so tightly I can barely draw a breath, sobbing into my shoulder, begging for forgiveness for believing her nephew's lies. Outside, sitting in the passenger seat of Rita's idling Corolla, my hands finally start to shake. I pull out my phone and text Detective Harding. "The audio has been played publicly. He ran," she replies 2 minutes later. "Emergency injunction approved by the judge 20 minutes ago. All accounts are frozen tight. Hospital access permanently revoked. I'll see him on Monday with handcuffs." Monday morning. The atmosphere at Mercy General is entirely different. The private security guard is gone from the hallway. The heavy, suffocating atmosphere of dread has completely lifted. Sunlight streams through the blinds of room 514. I walk inside. The heavy, paranoid sedatives have been entirely flushed from Grandpa's system. He is incredibly weak, his breathing shallow and rattling, but his eyes are bright, clear, and perfectly focused on the door. "Hey, Grandpa," I whisper, pulling up a chair. "Morgie," he rasps, patting the mattress with his thin hand. I sit down and tell him everything. I tell him about the church, the microphone, Aunt Rose standing up for him, and David fleeing into the snow. I don't exaggerate a single detail. He listens with his eyes closed, a faint, ghostly smile touching his dry lips. "Rose came?" he asks softly, a tear leaking from the corner of his eye. "She did. She was furious for you. She always believes the wrong person first," he whispers, his voice thick with old memories. "But she has a good heart." He reaches out and wraps his frail, bony fingers around my hand. His grip is weak, but the love in it is an anchor. "You don't need the house, Morgie. A house is just wood and nails, but I want you to keep it, protect it. I didn't do this for real estate, Grandpa." "I know," he says, opening his eyes to look at me clearly. "I built it for the one who would stay, and you stayed." 4 weeks later, the slow, heavy machinery of the legal system finally catches up to reality. A county judge formally issues subpoenas, verifying every single unauthorized wire transfer David made. My father is arrested in his driveway and formally charged with felony 3 financial exploitation of the elderly, which carries up to 24 months in a Michigan state prison alongside felony 4 identity fraud. His arraignment is set for next month. Barbara filed for divorce the exact day the arrest hit the local papers. It wasn't out of a sudden moral awakening. It was because the police investigation publicly exposed the truth about his termination, his massive hidden debts, and the embezzlement from his previous employer. Kevin stayed in Maplewood. He rented a small apartment and got a job pouring coffee at the Broad Street Bakery. Every Friday night he comes over to the house. We sit at the cherrywood desk Grandpa built, eating cheap takeout in the quiet kitchen. We don't call each other brother and sister yet, but last week he looked around the room, took a deep breath, and said, "This is the first house I've ever been in where I don't feel like I'm walking on a stage." That's close enough for now. Grandpa passed away peacefully 3 days after the church vigil.
He was surrounded by Aunt Rose, Kevin, and myself. When the heart monitor finally flatlined, there was no panic. There was no fear. It was just the quiet, gentle closing of a door. I didn't scream. I just held his scarred hand, kissed his forehead, and thanked him for the oatmeal. I still work the night shift at Edenview Senior Living. I still walk home in the biting cold at 2 a.m. I still turn the key in the lock, step into the dark hallway, and breathe in the scent of aged sawdust, coffee, and peace. I never spoke to my father again. I didn't need to. The most powerful boundary you can ever set is the one you never have to explain to the person who hurt you.
My grandfather built a massive house with his bare hands, but he protected his entire legacy with a $30 phone hidden under a hospital pillow. If you take anything from this story, let it be this. You don't have to be the loudest person in the room to win. You just have to be the one holding the truth when the lights finally come on. If Morgan's journey through the darkest hours of family betrayal to the quiet dawn of justice resonated with you, please leave a like and subscribe. It is the raw depth, intensity, and unshakable truth of stories like this that remind us of the strength we all carry inside. By subscribing, you become part of a community that values real resilience and stands with those who refuse to be broken. Stay with us. There are so many more powerful stories of survival and quiet victory waiting to be told.